Boom! We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. Well, folks, we are exactly 1 week away. Well, actually under a week away as of recording this video. And by the time I drop it, it will definitely be less than a week. I've said this in a few previous videos. As you get older, one of the positives, it's a rare positive, is that the football seasons come by a lot quicker than when you were younger. At least that's been my experience. And of course, what that brings us to is the game previews for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And week one will be against the Utah State Aggies. Now, initial thoughts on it for me are very simple. You know, I'm not a hater against Iowa playing teams like UNI and things like that. I think it's good to support in-state institutions and what have you. But if we're just speaking purely from a football sense, in my eyes, playing an FCS school only has downside. The upside really is only seen internally. If you're the Iowa Hawkeyes and you're trying to improve and develop over the course of the season and get better. But from an outsider's perspective and just gauging how good a win is or how bad a loss is, an FCS school has nothing but potential drawbacks and negatives on the Iowa Hawkeye schedule. Utah State, on the other hand, a Mountain West school, you never know. You never know if Utah State will have an 11-win season, a 10-win season, and end up one of the better group of 5 schools. So I think that this is actually a really solid week one opponent. And we will dive into even more of that in a moment. But before we do, I want to ask you guys to consider smashing that subscribe button, support a fellow Hawkeye fan out. I said this last week and I'll say it again. I am so grateful for the amazing support, the amazing fans out there. And I'll be the first to say not everybody loves the channel, and just in general, not everybody is always going to like what you do or things like, or even you for that matter. But those of you who have subscribed and supported, even those of you who have not, I am still very grateful that you have watched the content, that you've been with me every step of the journey, and so show support in your own way. So again, hit that subscribe button. I would love it if we can get to 2,000 subscribers by the time the season rolls around. At the very least, like, comment, share your thoughts on the game. If you guys want to donate and support your boys' coffee habit, you guys absolutely can, which many of you guys have by hitting the Cash App link or the PayPal link. And if neither of those work, you guys can always email me on the email provided and ask me how we could work that out. And without further ado, let's get into this. So right off the bat, guys, this is Utah State's depth chart. Now, I'm sure they will release another one by the time the season, or excuse me, I would say Monday or Tuesday, Utah State will release another depth chart before their game against Iowa. Iowa will do the same. Ultimately, I don't know how accurate Utah State's is. I just know what Iowa tends to do, and Iowa tends to not be completely accurate with regards to depth charts, especially in the off season. It's not that they lie about it. At least 50% of it is accurate, but I don't think Iowa holds as much weight on their depth chart as other programs. But this is what we have at this moment in time. You guys can see Utah State's group here. Now, I want to tell you guys this immediately. The PFF grades, we may look at a few, but the drawback to a week one game is that you're really just going off of last year's data. And as you guys well know, in college sports, there's a ton of roster turnover. So, we'll do our best with that. But primarily this week, what we'll be looking at are team stats, side-by-side comparison, and I will be providing you keys to this game and, of course, the vaunted game prediction. Here is the defense for Utah State. This is their current depth chart. Go ahead and look at Iowa's here as it loads up. And Utah State, by the way, guys, just as this loads up here, Utah State has a very interesting head coach, I think. I think he's a younger guy. He came from Arkansas State, and he actually has a pretty good head coaching record. Utah State last year went 6-7. They were not quite able to hit the 500 mark, but based off of the 6-7 record, I'm pretty sure they made a bowl game, which is always good for a group of 5 team, but we will confirm that. Just looking at the Iowa depth chart here, and this site here, Our Lads, I think provides some prognostication. It doesn't fully go off of what the teams provide. So that's why you see Seth Anderson here and Caleb Brown. Of course, we know that the one that the Iowa Hawkeyes released had some walk-ons at the wide receiver position. But I think that this looks good. I think that this will be mostly accurate. The one difference I would make is that, or the two differences I would make is I think that Rusty Feth will start for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He has far too much game experience, and he's just too good of an offensive lineman to not be in the starting rotation. Ultimately, I think that he may be good enough to play in the NFL. Now, we know in the past, though, that transfers have not always worked out, especially at Iowa. Some have, some haven't. That's the nature of things always. An example of that, especially along the offensive line, would be Coy Cronk. Now, Coy Cronk came from Indiana, and it seemed to be an excellent transfer portal get for the Iowa Hawkeyes a few years back. Now, of course, there were injuries and things of that nature, but he just didn't really work out at the University of Iowa. Then he leaves Iowa, and it looks like he's sticking around in the NFL. So you never really know. But this is the depth chart that Our Lads has. I fully expect Connor Colby to be the starting left guard or right guard for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Same with Rusty Feth. And then I would also say that there's a good chance that Dejon Parker will be the starting tackle. If I had to guess, I would say over Jennings Dunker. But to tell you the truth, guys, Jennings Dunker is having an excellent season. I mean, early on in the season, the fact is that regardless of what the starting 5 is initially, Iowa is going to be throwing a few different offensive line units or combinations out there to figure out what their best group is. And at Iowa, their kind of viewpoint on the matter is to have the best group of offensive linemen rather than the best at this specific position. They want the best 5 guys out there, and they will plug and play regardless. So that's at least what the Iowa Hawkeye coaching staff says, and you guys can take it for what you will. So there's definitely going to be a lot of movement there. Moving along here to the defensive line, of course, Noah Shannon received his suspension. I was expecting that. I told you guys that. I don't think his name would have been included had they not had some intel regarding him. And to tell you the truth, when he decided to not be a team captain for the Iowa Hawkeyes at Big Ten Media Day, it just seemed like he, above everybody else, knew what was coming down the pipeline. So that will give some opening to maybe an Ontario Thompson. But the two individuals that you will see get the most uptick is going to easily be Aaron Graves and Yaya Black. And then, of course, this is the special teams. Really quickly, looking at the head coach for Utah State. I mean, look at this, guys. This is his record as a head coach: 7-6, 9-4, 8-5, 7-5, 8-5, 8-5, 4-7. I mean, that's pretty good, guys, at a school like Arkansas State. And then he gets to Utah State, and in his first season, wins 11 games. Now, I always say that first seasons can be deceptive because as a new head coach, it's the same with players as well. When you're new, there's not as much tape. There's not as much feel for what you're about and your kind of your patterns. Which in a sport like football is what coaches are looking for, both on the team at large schematically and on players. They're looking for patterns from them behaviorally. So, you know, you have to take a first year with a grain of salt. Not just that, but secondly, the coach who comes in always inherits the roster, which can be good and it can be bad. Sometimes there's a ton of talent, and that coach, the previous coach, just wasn't able to do a lot with it. Or they were fired just as the accumulation of talent was hitting its peak. So it really, a first year you have to take with a grain of salt. His second year, he went 6-7. You know, that was probably filled more with a roster of his guys. So his name, by the way, is Blake Anderson. That is the head coach. He spent time at let's see here, Southern Miss, North Carolina. So there you guys have it. All right, moving on here, guys. Let's take a look at Iowa and their team stats from last year. 8-5, 40th out of 131 schools. Conference record 5-4. Iowa easily could have went 6-2 last year in the conference, but they also could have went 4-5 just as well. Points for 230, points against 17.7, or points a game 17.7, which ranked, this is offensively, which ranked 123rd out of 131 teams. Guys, that must improve, and we all know it. So I don't want to beat the dead horse here. Let's just leave it where it's at. But guys, man, that must improve. If Iowa can literally just turn that into, because I hear a lot of people saying, well, if Iowa can just be average, if they can just be average, folks, if Iowa can just be top 80, which is still not average offensively, it will help this team out so much more. Screw average. I mean, I'm just looking for top 80, baby. Come on now. Points against 173. Unreal that Iowa only scored 230 points last year, which was second out of 131 teams. Let's go to Utah State real quick. This was their situation last year: 6-7, 74th out of 130. Actually, you know what? We can answer really quickly if they played in a bowl game or not. Yes, they did last year. They lost first responder. I don't know if they played it, though. That's interesting because there is no score here. Let's just go ahead and click on this. Let's see if we can get an answer to this. They played Memphis, it looks like, first responder bowl, and lost 38-10. So they did indeed play in a bowl game last year. Here is the team information: 6-7, conference record 5-3, pretty good conference record. That was probably good enough for at least a top 4 finish in the Mountain West. Points for, they scored 289. Points a game, 22.2, just barely better than the Iowa Hawkeyes, 104th out of 131, but still, they were still better than Iowa offensively. Points against, 405. They gave up 31.2 points per game, 105th out of 131. Guys, I got to tell you, seeing those two stats and they still went 6-7 is pretty incredible. I mean, those two stats are like you would think would come from a 2 or 3 win team, not a 6-7 team. Not that that's, incredible or anything, but offense, defense, here are some more stats here. Total offense, 354 yards per game. Defense, they gave up almost 400 yards per game. Their leading passer was Cooper Legis. Let's go ahead and see if he's going to be back this year as their quarterback. It looks like he is. They still have him listed as the starting quarterback. So it looks like they will have a returning quarterback under center. Always interesting. Let's go ahead and look at Iowa's team stats here. Penalties. They looks like they average 6.9 penalties per game. Defensive, that seems like a lot. For 62 yards defensively and 77.5 yards offensively. Rushing and receiving. Tyler Calvin was their leading guy with 1,122 yards. He is not back, though. Looks like Cooper Legis can run a little bit. He had 303 yards on the ground. Robert Briggs, let's go ahead and take a look if he's on the roster here. Robert Briggs. He is back. So that is going to be the starting tailback for the Aggies. Robert Briggs, he had 303 yards last year. Let's go ahead and take a look at Iowa's team stats here. Offense. $251.5 yards per game compared to Utah State's 354. So Utah State definitely had a better offensive year than the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa only gave up 270.8 yards per game. Guys, this defense was nasty. It was easily one of the best defenses in the country, and I would say a top 3 Phil Parker defense, a top 5 defense in the Kirk Ferentz era as a whole. I mean, just talent littered all over the roster. So there we have it, some of the team stats. I think the main thing here are the defensive totals. If you guys want to pause that, you guys can check that out. Caleb Johnson, 779 yards last year. He's returning. LaShawn Williams, 412. He's returning. Spencer Petras had negative 182 yards rushing. Iowa, of course, lost Gavin Williams, but I think that that's okay with the emergence of Josiah Patterson. I really like what he has been showing us thus far. Luke Lachey, of course, had almost 400 yards receiving. So there we have it. The last thing I want to show is Eric All's stats as a tight end. And of course, starting quarterback Cade Mora's stats as a quarterback while at Michigan. So here is Eric All's stats. It looks like I already knew this, of course, before looking it up, but it looks like he had one really big season. I believe similar to Cade McNamara, he was injured and, other guys surpassed him on the depth chart. But folks, any individual that can have 437 yards, especially a tight end at the FBS level in the Big Ten, that's no joke. Okay. There's a reason why people are extremely high on Eric All. And quite frankly, why Iowa was really high. Iowa recruited him out of high school. So to me, if Eric can just have the same as that, it would be considered a successful campaign for him for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And of course, here's our guy, Cade McNamara, the savior of the Iowa Hawkeye offense, or potential savior. Let's take a look at his offensive stats. I do also want to see his PFF grade if I can find it. Of course, his main season that is important to look at is in 2021, where he had 2,576 yards passing, 15 tubs to 6 INTs with a quarterback rating of a 141.9. Folks, if he can just have that same season, this will be a successful, very, very, very successful year for the Iowa Hawkeyes as a whole, but definitely for the Iowa Hawkeye offense. I found this from Pro Football Focus back when Cade McNamara was battling, and this is not a secret, by the way, guys, but when he was battling J.J. McCarthy for the starting quarterback position at Michigan, it said that Cade McNamara's career grade was 76.3, which would still definitely be better than Spencer Petras. This competition is leaning toward the incumbent McNamara after McCarthy missed most of the spring due to a shoulder injury. No surgery was required in the 2021 five-star, should get back to throwing in the coming days, but he's behind in this battle. That being said, if McNamara does end up as the week 1 starter, his leash will likely be short. The veteran is the safer option, but the underclassman offers far more upside. Only once did McNamara produce an 80-plus single game grade in 2021, and that came in week 1 against Western Michigan when he threw only 11 passes. He lives and dies by a quick underneath passing offense due to his limited arm. McNamara ranked 41st in the Power 5 in deep passing grade, and was 3rd to last among the group in inaccurate pass rate on 10-plus yard throws. So that's definitely something he has had to improve upon. McCarthy, on the other hand, is a high-level athlete who has a legit arm talent. 5 of his 10 deep passing attempts were deemed big time. So that is that on Cade McNamara. And last but not least, guys, we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. My thoughts on this game, and of course, my prediction. Number one, this is a week 1 game, and you never really know what you're going to get. I hate to say it, but it's especially true with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa tends to be it's kind of all over the place. We've had seasons where they have gotten off to a really good start. But we've had seasons like last year where it was a very, very slow start, and us fans were just hoping and praying that they would get back on track. And of course, what I'm talking about is the Iowa offense. The Iowa offense will be the focus of mine and many other fans across the country when it comes to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Can Cade McNamara take this offense to another level? Now, I want to caution you guys from over analyzing and putting too much on Cade McNamara, because guys, although he had a better season than what we've seen from Spencer Petras, I wouldn't say he necessarily had a better season, one season, than Nate Stanley. Nate Stanley had a season where he had 26 passing touchdowns. Guys, if we had that, we'd be in heaven. People forget Nate Stanley had back-to-back 20-plus yard passing touchdown seasons. And so Cade McNamara, while he had a decent year, it wasn't an elite year or anything like that. Cade McNamara's primary skill, his primary go-to, and I would say the biggest addition to this Iowa Hawkeye team. Yes, he has some talent, and it's probably the most talent Iowa has had at the quarterback position. It's hard to say since which Iowa quarterback. I think Nate Stanley was a talented quarterback. I think CJ Beathard was a starting quarterback. But he's talented. Let's just say Iowa has not had this type of quarterback in the room for about 3-4 years. Okay. So pretty much since Spencer Petras was the Iowa quarterback, and Iowa didn't have anybody behind him that offered what Cade McNamara offers. But his primary or just talent that he brings is his leadership, both in the locker room and on the field. And everything else is just extra. I still expect him to have a fairly solid season. I said in my quarterback preview and breakdown that if Cade McNamara can have anywhere between 15 and 18 passing touchdowns, I would still consider that a success, considering what we've seen in the past 2 years from the Iowa Hawkeye offense. But of course, a lot of Iowa fans are going to be expecting a 20-plus touchdown season. I would pump the brakes on that, okay? Nonetheless, that's what we're going to be looking for, and we're going to be watching Cade McNamara. Specifically for me, what I'm going to be looking at, besides, of course, the passing attack, and especially with the new pieces that Iowa has added, and Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson, Eric All, is Cade McNamara's ability to scramble. Now, knock on wood, I told you guys that the one drawback that I have noticed with Cade McNamara is that he is injury prone. So while I'm very interested to see his ability and running the football and what that adds to this Iowa Hawkeye team as a whole, I'm also very hesitant in considering how much I'd like that as a whole, considering how injury prone he is. So there's going to be a lot to watch for and look for, including Eric All. I'm extremely excited to see the newcomers like Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson, Eric All, as I've said, but I'm also excited to see Deontay Vines. Deontay Vines has been on this Iowa roster for quite a while now, and there's been a lot of positive reports for him. I'm very curious to see what he can do with a quarterback like Cade McNamara. Luke Lachey, of course, is the next up-and-coming Iowa tight end. Same with Eric All. We'll see how good that unit can be, but this is week 1, folks, and it really all depends. Utah State, I think I showed in the coach's history, they should be a decently coached team. Their head coach, Blake Anderson, seems to be a decent head coach. He has shown that he can win at the Division I level. But playing Iowa, of course, is a different animal altogether, especially playing this Iowa Hawkeye defense. Furthermore, looking at Utah State's stats from last year, their offense is not something that has me worried. So ultimately, I think that this is going to be a huge mismatch for Utah State. I don't know how much preseason hype Utah State has compared to other years. It's kind of hard to tell when it's a group of 5 program. There's not as much high profile it's not as profiled as a team like Iowa, so it's really hard to say. But just going off of last year's stats, which definitely can be deceiving, I like this matchup tremendously for the Iowa Hawkeyes, as Iowa's defense will be elite again. And there's a ton to look for on that side of the ball with Xavier Wanpa, the new linebacker unit in Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, and Kyler Fisher. We'll see what those guys can do. But overall, I really, really like this Iowa Hawkeye matchup against Utah State. I think this is a solid first game for the Iowa Hawkeyes. My key to this game, and really what I would consider a solid performance for the Iowa Hawkeyes, is for them to score 25 or more points offensively, 300 yards of total offense, and of course their defense totally limiting Utah State and just pinning them back time after time after time. We'll see the development of Drew Stevens and Torrey Taylor. We know that both of them are elite. Iowa special teams are elite. We'll see what Cooper DeJean and other individuals can do in the return game. We'll see if Iowa has a return guy like we've seen in the past with the Desmond King and Amir Smith-Marset. But I really, really like the pieces all around. So again, about 300 yards total offense and 25 or more points offensively for the Iowa Hawkeyes, to me, would be a success. I am definitely picking the Iowa Hawkeyes to win this game. I'm going to say that they win this game 27-10. I almost went with 7 points. I really think Utah State is going to absolutely struggle, and they're going to have a long day playing against the Iowa Hawkeyes. But you never know, guys. I always say this, you never know with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Kirk Ferentz tends to have weird week 1, week 2 performances. They're kind of all over the board. So you really cannot have too high of an expectation. I mean, folks, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, if you go back to the Ricky Stanzi years, the year after their amazing season where they had a ton of returners coming back, and it was one of the best teams Kirk Ferentz has had, they nearly lost to UNI in week 1. We've seen really good Iowa teams lose to Iowa State. So case in point, it's just really difficult to predict, but I am picking the Iowa Hawkeyes to win 27-7. And I think they will get on track in this season. Hopefully Cade Mora can pass for 2 touchdowns. And of course, I haven't even talked about my guy, Caleb, our guy Caleb, the running back. I mean, this guy is an absolute beast. I really think he might, when it's all said and done, Caleb Johnson, when it's all said and done at the end of this season, I would not be surprised in the least if he is one of the top 3 running backs in the Big Ten. Now, he's only a sophomore, but this guy has all the physical tools to be a successful running back. Ultimately, to me, what would be the biggest sign of positiveness and what I would feel the best about is if Iowa can have an excellent game on the ground with their running back group, which I feel very, very good about, with the young talent as well as the veteran talent in LaShawn Williams. All right, guys, let me know what you guys think about this game. Give me your guys' thoughts, your prediction on the game, your score. Let me know if there's any videos or any other thoughts that you guys think I should know. Of course, hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share. You guys know the drill. Let's get this channel to 2,000 subs. If you guys want to donate, you absolutely can. Cash App or PayPal. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and facts our feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys and see you guys next time. Go Hawks.